about, you have a deep dive into the situation. All you know is that you really don't like to work with this person, because if I were to ask you, well, what did this person do? You probably could tell me, well, they did X, Y, and Z. Hello everyone, and welcome to another Wavelength. My name is Waveney. I am a leadership coach, and I am here to help you to be your best on your leadership journey. If you're not a leader and you're an aspiring leader, this is still the show for you, so stay tuned. Now, are you ready to get on the same wavelength? Fabulous. So today I'm going to be speaking about values, triggers, and how all this ties into emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a skill that, and a word, a phrase that has been it's being made popular, especially during the pandemic, after the pandemic. There are a lot of studies out there that says, listen, these are the list of skills. These are the list of maybe top 20 skills you'll need after the pandemic. These are the list of top 20 skills that all leaders going into the future will need. And among those skills, emotional intelligence is listed. And I do agree with those experts. Emotional intelligence is super important. Now, many times when people think about emotional intelligence, it's really, they think about it on a surface level. They think about it from the standpoint that, hey, it's about managing my emotions and probably working around and managing the emotions of others. But I find that it's very surface level. And so today I want to share with you how it all ties together and how it impacts you as a leader or as someone on your career journey. So let's get into it. So emotional intelligence refers to a different way of being smart, because there's your IQ, which is your intelligence, like your math skills, your English skills, like those types of skills, your intelligence skills, right? And then there is the emotional intelligence skills, and as the word suggests, it deals with emotions. So it's another way of being smart. EI, as it's so called, is a key to high performance, particularly for outstanding leadership. It's not your IQ, but rather it is how you manage yourself and your relationships with others. And this is something I pulled from, I would call him the father of emotional intelligence, because he really made this word and this skill popular, which is Daniel Goleman. He's done some great work on it, and so that's what he's saying. It's all about relationships. And if you have been viewing the People's Brand for a while, your work, I always say this, your work is done through people. And if you go to my Instagram, if you go to my Facebook, I have a blog there. I tell you really quick what I do, which is I help new managers develop leadership influence by mastering their relationships at work and leveraging their communication skills. And there is a reason I focus on that, because at the end of the day, I have found that it's all about the people. You can't do the work yourself. Your work is done through people. And so it is important that you develop a high level of emotional intelligence. So, like I said, people don't really get really detailed when they talk about it, but today I'm gonna do a deep dive, because emotional intelligence first starts by being aware. You have to be aware, and it's an awareness of yourself. You have to know yourself. I have a 3-day self-leadership challenge. I will encourage you to go and take that. And there's a reason I start with that, because if you don't know yourself, you cannot manage others well. You cannot manage others well. So it's important you know yourself. it's important that you not only know yourself, it's important that you know what's important to you. It's important that you know your values. It's important to know your triggers, what gets under you, what makes you tick, because all of this helps you on your leadership journey in relation to managing others, in relation to interacting with others. So let's get into the story time, and I'll pull this all together. So when I got out of school, my first job was at a bank, and I remember this vividly because I was a bit shy. When I tell people that I am an introvert, they roll their eyes, right? But I was a bit shy, I was a bit quiet, and I had a supervisor from hell. I remembered her, she was very difficult. She made going to work very difficult. I didn't want to go to work. I was always afraid to ask her a question because she would answer my question back with a question. So, I'm new. It's my first job. I'm trying to clarify something and she's going to answer back with a question. And so you may be thinking, well, Waveney, maybe because you were young, maybe it's you. It was not me. It was not me, because I would have people in the organization, in the department, coming aside, who would work with her for a while, coming aside and saying, hey, listen, don't take her on. This is just the way she is. She's this way with certain people. Just, it'll all go away. It will all blow over. How many of you can identify with that? How many of you can identify with me being that person that everybody goes to and say, hey, don't take on that boss, or don't take this on, because this is just the way they are, right? And how many of you do that? I'm digressing from the topic a bit, but how many of you do that? How many of you are the type of people to go to people that you see are being either bullied or being treated unfairly and say, hey, you're trying to placate it. Hey, don't take on this person. What I would encourage you to do is go to that person who is being the bully, who is causing the strife, who's causing the problems, and speak to them, right? That's another topic all by itself. But I just wanted to show you that it's not all in my head, because these people were saying that to me, right? And it was just not a good experience for me overall. I really, really didn't like it. And I vowed that I would never be like her. Now, at the time, I had no clue that I would be doing all of this. I had no clue that I would reach this far. I couldn't even see past my nose, right? When you are 18, 19 years of age, you're not thinking about those things back then. I'm not sure about now, but you're not thinking about those things. And so it was a difficult time, and I vowed I would never be like that person, because it left a mark, right? It left a mark. It left, painful memories for me. Fast forward, I am now in hospitality. I've entered into hospitality. The Marriott was coming to my country, to St. Kitts, and I decided that I would go and try my hand at hospitality. I love the energy. I remember the job fair. I remember them saying, we hire great smiles, right? And it spoke to something in me. And so I applied numerous times, and I got in. And I started, my first entry level was in HR. And the hotel was in the pre-opening stage. And so my HR manager, there was a director, but my manager at the time was this gentleman by the name of Fernando, and I still remember Fernando to this day. Fernando was the one that really set the foundation for me. He saw the potential in me. He pushed me. As a matter of fact, Fernando is responsible. I credit where I am part of my success, a huge part of my success, because of Fernando. Fernando was the one who got me into training, right? He was the one who saw that. And so I have great fond memories of Fernando. No, Fernando held me accountable. I don't think that I agreed with everything, but he made such an impact on me. He set such a foundation. He really taught me what an HR professional is and was, and it really set the tone for me and my career in HR, right? And so I tell these stories because they're two different stories. On one hand, my first experience with my supervisor was terrible. I vowed not to be like her. On the other hand, I had a really great experience with someone else. And so I want to show you how this shows up or showed up in my life as it relates to emotional intelligence. But before we go there, I want to explain to you what I believe. And this is why it's important. You'll see later on to know what is important to you, what is your value. So for me, I believe that leaders are placed in a position not just because of their competence or any of those things. That's great. But I believe that when you're in a leadership role, you have a responsibility to the people that you lead. You have a responsibility to guide, to coach, to lead. You have a responsibility to treat people fairly and to treat people well, to treat people with kindness. And I believe that to whom much is given, the fact that you are in the position of authority is a huge thing, because when you have that manager title, when you have that director title, you are in a position of authority, you have some sort of power. And many times people abuse that power, and I believe it is wrong. I believe when you're in those roles, you are not just there for yourself, you are there for others. This is a principle I live by, and this is what I believe. I believe the roles that I have been given, that I have been placed there by God, right? My gifts made room for me, and I was positioned by God, or whomever you believe, with the universe, or whomever, the higher power, whomever, but I have been positioned there by God, and as such, I have to carry out my duties well. I'm placed there for a reason. I'm placed there not just for my own gain, but for someone else. This is what I believe. And this is very strong for me, as you can tell. I have a strong sense of what is right and what is wrong, and especially when it comes to treating people fairly. You may not agree with everyone, but you want to treat people fairly, and this is what I believe, and this feeds into me being authentic, and it feeds into me having integrity. And so that is what I believe, that is my values, and it really shapes how I behave. It dictates how I behave. And, you know, in HR, if you don't know, my background is in HR, as I mentioned some time ago. At this time of the recording, I am still in HR, and this is what I still believe. This is what governs my behavior. But in HR, I have seen over time that people who are in positions of authority, they sometimes can't handle that. They sometimes use their power unfairly. They use their authority to get down on people, to hurt people, to disenfranchise people, right? And I have a thing with bad leaders, right? I have a thing with bad leaders because I've seen where sometimes when people have those huge leadership flaws where they're not people focused and people centered, that they seem to thrive and flourish just like my supervisor that I mentioned in my first job, they seem to thrive and flourish because they've been at the company for a very long time, or they are really good at what they do on the technical side, but on the people side of it, people kind of bypass that, right? There's some companies that do that. They're like, oh yeah, but this person is good at this, but yeah, just give them a break. This is how they are. It'll blow over, sorry. And people kind of accept that. And I've seen that from an HR perspective, right? Now, these type of leaders, they are not aligned with my values. I just explained to you what my values were, what I believe. They're not aligned. We're not in alignment, right? And we will never be in alignment unless they change. And people just don't change like that. I am not going to change my values, and maybe they're not. I can't speak for them. Why am I taking the time to tell you these stories, what my values are, the story about my two supervisors, my two managers? Why am I telling you this? I am telling you this because if you want to be an influential leader, if you want to do something great in this world, or in your environment, in your world, right? Because we all impact people, no matter what. You don't need to be like a Beyonce or Jay-Z or Barack Obama to impact people. You can impact people where you are, and I believe that as a leader, you do. You do have the influence and the position and the authority to impact people just by that title. And this is why I take that job so seriously. But it's important that you understand what your values are, what's important to you. For me, it's about having integrity, right? It's about treating people right. For you, top on your list, integrity might be there, but for you, perhaps family is the most important thing. You have to know what's important to you, so that when you come across, when you encounter a company, culture, or people whose values are not in alignment with yours, you understand what is happening. And this is what we call emotional intelligence. You have to understand yourself first, because you will be reacting against something or someone and you have no idea why. Well, the reason why is because there is an incongruence, right? It's their values, your values, they're not in alignment. There's an incongruence there. It's out of alignment. And so you have to understand that. You have to know that. All right? And so what will happen is, or what happened was, before I understood what was happening, when I had a low emotional intelligence, when I had a low level of emotional intelligence, this is how I showed up. I had a challenging time engaging with others whose values were not in alignment with mine. I had a hard time because I didn't want to engage with them. It was challenging. I believe sometimes I was even rude. I believe sometimes I was even, unprofessional. And in terms of my body language and probably how I communicated with them, because I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know why I felt the way I felt. I know what I didn't like. I knew what I observed, but I couldn't put it into words because I didn't know. And this is important. You must know this. And so the other thing that was happening too is that every situation, right, that they were involved in, like there were times that perhaps like this person as a manager, they would come with a situation to HR, and immediately my bias against them would kick in. I would be like, they're probably wrong. They're probably wrong because, they displayed X, Y, and Z. That, for HR professional, that is not a good place to be. right? Making those type of judgments, having those type of biases, strong biases. And don't get me wrong, we all have biases, but the key is to understand, to be aware of them, understand them, and work on them. At the time, I had no clue because I was emotionally unintelligent. Is that it? Or had a low EQ. Let me say that before I don't trip myself up, right? I had low emotional intelligence, right? So had a hard time engaging with them, saw every situation like it's probably about them, it's probably them. And then I assumed that they were just bad people, that they were not nice because this is how they were. And this is not a good place. And I share this story because you may be going through the same thing, right? You may be in a position, in a leadership role, or maybe you don't even have to be in a leadership role, and you find yourself being triggered by someone. You haven't thought about why this is happening. You haven't deep dive into the situation. All you know is that you really don't like to work with this person, because if I were to ask you, well, what did this person do? You probably could tell me, well, they did X, Y, and Z. I don't like that, and that's fine. But you need to dive a little bit further, because what I want to the point that I'm trying to get across is your reaction to them is coming from either a trigger, right? Or a value that you have, or maybe even both. Just like me. The trigger was the bad experience that I had with that supervisor in my first job, right? The other side of it is I had a great supervisor that showed me how to be professional, that was courteous, that was kind, that held me accountable, right? But also saw my potential, that set the foundation, that set that standard for me, that hey, this is what HR is all about. And it also tied into my beliefs, it also tied into my value. And so when I encountered someone who was the opposite or who was not in alignment, it triggered something and I didn't know why. And it's so important that you identify what it is. This is the beginning of emotional intelligence. This is what we're talking about, because you cannot lead others if you can't lead yourself. If you don't understand why you are reacting to that other leader, that peer, that person on your team that is doing something that's triggering, if you don't understand why you are having that reaction, you're not going to be able to lead them, because you won't be able to control yourself. Perhaps when you engage with them, or you'll avoid engaging with them. There's so many things and so many ways we unconsciously and consciously deal with people or interact with people whom we're not in alignment with. Emotional intelligence, guys. Emotional intelligence, becoming aware, understanding your triggers and your values and how it impacts you showing up. So I just spoke about how I reacted with low emotional intelligence. And of course, over time, I changed. I had to change because I wanted better for myself. I wanted to be a better leader. I wanted to have better relationships. I understand that in this world that I will have to work with people who are different from me, whose values are different from me. And especially being in HR, you work with all sorts of people, right? All sorts, all types, all personalities, races, cultures. So I have, I take pride in what I do, and so I have to be better. Okay? And so this is how I show up now, having a higher level of emotional intelligence. This is how I show up. One, I see them, and this is an exercise that I learned. I see them as humans just like me. And I chose this for number one. you have to see others, even the people that we don't agree with, even the people that we disagree, that we don't like, that, you know, they're difficult and they're challenging. Take it back. Take away all those. There are people just like you. They have fears just like you. And, you know, the more I do this work, the more I realize that a lot of time people are reacting from fear. It's fear. Fear shows up in so many ways. I'll probably do a show on that, how fear shows up. But fear shows up in so many ways, right? So they're people just like me and you. And when you start looking through that lens, you start to soften. You start to have more empathy, which is another skill in emotional intelligence. High leaders who are good leaders, great leaders, leaders who have high emotional intelligence, have high levels of empathy. They do. And so you have to understand that people have fears and hopes and dreams. And these people who you find challenging, they're people just like you. Just like you. So that's one way to start. That's a place to start. The second way high emotional intelligence shows up is you engage with others, but you have boundaries. For me, I'm very aware. I can know, I can spot, I can see when people are not in alignment with me. And that's okay. They're on their journey. I'm on my journey. They have their beliefs. I have my beliefs. I can be professional. I can engage with you. I can support you at work. Will I have a glass of wine with you outside of work? Probably not. If I have a choice, probably not. And you have to set those boundaries for yourself, right? Maybe you have to work with someone. Maybe you have to do whatever, right? Maybe, and it, you know, being professional, being kind and courteous doesn't take anything off of you. You have to understand what your boundary is. Will you go out and have dinner at their home? Will you invite them to your house? Probably not. Do you want to sit and hear about their weekend? You probably won't do that either. So you have to engage, but with boundaries. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because you have to protect you and you have to protect your peace. Okay? And then lastly, because I know myself, because I've gotten to the point where I know myself and I spend time getting to know me, I understand how poor leadership, when I see situations or people that I view that have poor leadership, I understand already how it impacts me. I understand how it affects me. And so what I do is I am prepared. I am prepared. So now, if someone who displays poor leadership, they come to me, whereas before I'm thinking automatically, it's your fault, whatever. No, I listen to them. I already know that, you know, how I feel, but I'm prepared for that. And so I push past that and I listen openly. I listen openly, I ask questions, I am that professional, I show up that way, all right? And I listen even further, I ask even more questions, right? It's like when you work with people that you may not like, you tend, and you want the relationship to work, you tend to be a little bit even extra nicer because you know yourself. I don't know if you've had that experience. And let's be honest, we're not going to like everybody we work with. We're not God, right? But we have to get along. And there are ways and there are tools and there are techniques in which to do so. And so this is what high emotional intelligence shows. This is what high emotional intelligence shows up as, you know. I'm tripping over my words because I am so passionate about this. I am so passionate about this topic and I want to share this with you because I know that you're going to find value in it. There's so many leaders that you know, they show up and they don't have the tools. When you become a manager, when you become a new leader, when you become a director, nobody tells you these things. Nobody prepares you for these things, right? And unfortunately, many times our friends and families and, you know, they're well-meaning, well-intended, but they give us the wrong advice. They give us the wrong advice, and they're supportive, yes, they're great for a listening ear, but sometimes they give us the wrong advice. And so it's important for me to come on here and share this with you. So it is, again, just by wrapping up, it is important that you understand yourself. It is important that you understand how situations that you've had in the past that you may think that you've gotten over, how it shows up as a trigger, right? Because these situations are usually triggers, right? It's important to understand your values. What is important to you? What do you hold in high regard? Is it your family? Is it integrity? Is it a strong sense of justice and fairness, how people are treated, right? Your values, how they impact how you react to people, right? You put all this together, it's about understanding yourself, knowing yourself, coming up, finding the tools and techniques to overcome. So when you have to interact or lead or manage difficult or challenging individuals, you already know, you already have a plan, you already have a course of action, you already have a map of how to get past that. And this, my friend, is about having awareness and being on the path to a high level of emotional intelligence. Now, if you've enjoyed this show, please share it out with a work bestie. Please share this for whenever you are encountering a challenging situation. And if you are loving this content and you need more support, you can work with me inside my coaching program. It's called Communicate to Influence. I am going to link it below so you can read more about that program. But send me a DM, let me know, send me a WhatsApp message, let me know how this program has helped you today. Thank you so much, and I'll see you